What's up, guys? How we doing? I hope you're all having a good day. Yeah, here we go. Without further ado, coming at you from the car here. Just wanted to drop a little bit of knowledge about insulin, and maybe you know about it, and maybe you don't. But if you don't, perhaps you should continue watching. Anyway, so we're talking about insulin today because it's a pretty big deal. And we're doing a fresh group of macros crew, and we're also doing. I also just figured it would be some good information for people to have if they don't know about it already. So one of the really great parts about a macros based diet, and let's be honest here, okay? A macros based diet is really nothing special. Okay, it's really just a way of thinking about your food. That's it. Okay. There's a million different all diets are macros based because all food contains proteins, fats, and carbs. However, how you split those proteins, fats, and carbs up, how you portion out your meals, and when you eat them are all totally different things. Okay. And so basically the goal of a good macros based diet would largely be to control your insulin levels, right? And the reason being is because when you control your insulin levels, you're using science to your advantage, right? You're utilizing that science, that nutritional science, to your advantage, which will allow you in actual fact to eat more food, especially food such as carbohydrates or carbs, which seem to be on everyone's like I hate you list these days. But if you take care to eat your carbs at ideal times, and you portion your meals well, you're working towards controlling your insulin levels, which will give you a huge advantage in improving your body composition and losing weight if that's your goal, or even gaining weight but not putting on copious amounts of fat while you gain weight, right? And so how does all that work? That's a great question. I know you're asking that. And so magic is the answer, obviously. Seriously though. So the way that works is, well, first you kind of have to understand insulin's role in your body, right? And so insulin's role is it's a signal hormone that tells your body to start storing or to start uptaking sugar out of the bloodstream, okay? So insulin's a hormone. It's secreted by your pancreas. It signals the uptake of sugar out of the bloodstream, and that would be accompanied by, that would be predecessed by an increase in your blood sugar level, right? So let's say you eat a bunch of candy or a bunch of sugar, right? Any kind of simple carb that's easily digested is going to have a greater impact on spiking your insulin levels, okay? And so what happens is the blood sugar goes up, right? You get a signal to the pancreas that says blood sugar went up. We got to secrete some insulin here and uptake the sugar out of the blood, and we're going to bring it into the cell. Okay. But what happens is a lot of the time, if people eat a lot of carbs, some people don't eat any. Funny that. But typically the people who eat a lot of carbs, sorry, let's rewind. I'm going to rewind a little bit, and let's talk about glycogen. I know this is long, but you got to talk about glycogen too. Glycogen is an important thing to understand because glycogen is your body's way of storing carbohydrate, okay? You have glycogen stores directly in the muscles, and you have glycogen stores in your liver, okay? Obviously, there's a finite amount of storage for those two areas for carbohydrate, right? So you can't just always store all the sugar that goes in your bloodstream or that you eat and have it stored as glycogen. At a certain point, you reach the maximum storage capacity for glycogen, and then it starts to become fat. When so say you've eaten a ton of sugar or a ton of carbs, right? You've maxed out your glycogen store, so you can't store those carbohydrates as glycogen either in the liver or in the muscles anymore. Okay, and so now your body says, okay, so glycogen's maxed out. We can't store it there. We're going to store it as fat. Plain and simple, like literally like that. Okay. And so why is that important? Because if you eat a lot of carbs all the time, okay, and your meals are, especially carbs that get digested really quickly, right? The kind of like any kind of simple sugars or anything like that, or at least if you're eating the simple sugars, they're not mixed with anything, right? Then they're gonna spike your insulin levels to very high levels, and that's gonna start the signaling process to take the sugar out of the bloodstream. And if your glycogen levels are already maxed out, which would be typical for someone who's not particularly active, okay? So if your glycogen stores are already maxed out or close to being maxed out, then at that point your body's going to be like, well, we can't really store it as carbs because you don't need it for like quick, readily available energy. So, well, we got to do something with it. So we're going to store it as fat. And so that's kind of a bad thing, all right? You can see where I'm going with this. So how all this ties together is when you take care to eat your carbs in and around your times of activity. So when you're, before, during, and after your exercise or your CrossFit or whatever it is that you do that would be deemed as, like intense, vigorous physical activity, then the insulin spike is going to be minimized, right? Because or not necessarily minimized, but first of all, the storage of fat would be minimized, because especially if you're eating in and around your workout time, those carbohydrates, the glycogen levels will be depleted, right? Because you will have burned energy and stuff like that during your exercise. And at that point, the first place that those carbohydrates are going to go is to be stored as glycogen for use at a later time, right? But on top of all that, when you're eating meals that are well balanced with proteins, with fat in it, with carbs in it, carbohydrates and stuff like that, and most food in your stomach can really only be digested at the rate at which the slowest food can be digested. Okay, so that means that food, when you eat a diet that has fats and proteins in it, those things are going to take much longer to digest and break down versus a simple sugar, right? So that's going to slow the process of carbohydrates, or sugars, if you will, getting to your bloodstream, which will, number one, it'll minimize the spike in your blood sugar levels, which will decrease the insulin effect. And number two, it's gonna prolong, and that's gonna prolong the time over which that sugar gets released into your bloodstream, and it's going to minimize the amount of fat that you might store. And it might say, okay, well, the blood sugar level's reasonably good right now, or whatever the case is, right? But depending on you and your physical activity levels and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of why it's super important to take care to eat, to eat well-timed, well-portioned meals, especially if you want to eat carbs, right? Because, and again, keeping in mind that there are some people who don't give a fuck about how they look, right? And so they eat whatever they want, and that's cool. Good for you. But for some people who are looking to change their body comp a little bit, drop a few pounds, you don't necessarily have to starve yourself. But if you take care to minimize the insulin effect, or minimize the insulin spike that you might get by eating carbs at random times, and take care to eat those carbs before, during, and after your workouts, you don't have to starve yourself to change how you look, or change your to lose weight. You're just using science to your advantage. It's really that simple. When we do the macros challenge, inevitably there's like a bunch of people that go like, I've never eaten this much food in my life and lost weight at the same time, right? And why is that? It's literally science. That's it. That's all. We're just using science to our advantage to allow us to eat as much food as we can and still get the result that we want, right? And that's mostly for weight loss people, because weight gain people, like, they don't want to eat a lot of food. At least that's me. Like, anyway, we're getting on tangents here, but that's my insulin talk. Okay, I don't know if anyone's actually going to watch all the way to the end, but if you do, I guarantee you'll probably learn something. Okay, hope you had a great day. Enjoy. Peace.